It's interesting for me because I had an experience yesterday when I was getting in the shower. That's how this stuff comes. And it was a very profound experience for me, and it was actually only the second time I'd ever experienced what I experienced there. And yet it stayed with me all day, and even this morning it stayed with me, so I said, oh, this must be part of what I'm to share with these people. And so when I was sitting in reflection right before we started, the Spirit started showing me things, and as it showed me what it was, I said, oh, I understand this now. Am I really to talk about these people? Because part of my mind goes, well, if I talk about that, it's like that ought to be the climax of what we do. Not the foreplay. So, but on the other hand, that's what's present in me, because that will help to set the tone of the workshop. But I don't know why it will set the tone of the workshop, but it will. And so I'm just going to talk about the experience. And the funny thing is that in the way I've done my path, I was always taught to kind of keep the inner things inside. So a lot of my inner awarenesses and experiences I've kept to myself. And it's funny, because if you're really doing that, then how does anybody know what you're aware of or what your experience is? Because you're not talking about it. And yet, for the purposes of assisting people and helping them to become more available to the Spirit and more aware of what the Spirit is doing with them, there's times when it's important to share those things, to talk about them, not to create an aggrandizement to the ego or my ego or my personality. I'm just sharing with you the experience to see if it helps you come more awake. And in this room and out there online, and we have hundreds of people out there now online, there are going to be people in all sorts of different places in their progression and in their awakening. And I don't know how to reach you all. The Spirit reaches you all the time. And what's going to happen while we work is that's going to be amplified for you, so that a conversation that's going on inside your consciousness all the time is going to become more tangible to you, more alive for you, and hopefully awakened enough inside of you that it becomes an ongoing part of your experience. And I wish that for everybody, because I think that is the purpose of our being here, to come to that point of awakening, that we re-engage in the eternal communication that comes from God, because it's ongoing. And those that live in it and know of it know that it is the one thing they cannot live without, for it is the source of life and the source of purpose in all beings. And as we fall away from that and drift away from it, that is a core part of why we suffer our experience in this life. So with that, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about an experience I had. It was that when I stepped into my shower, I was flashing back into a past life. And it was interesting, I was flashing back into a past life and a memory in a past life, but the past life I was flashing back into was not my memory. It was a memory of another consciousness. It was a memory of the one who we call the Buddha. And in that memory, see, I'm back in it again. In that memory, I was remembering it as the Buddha remembered it. And so it was like I was the Buddha remembering the memory. But I'm not the Buddha, but you understand, I was like looking through that consciousness and experiencing it as he experienced it. And this was from the time before he woke up and before he went through the great process of awakening that's described by many people. And he was walking in what seemed to be like a garden area. And he was in great distress inside and a great longing because he felt an emptiness inside of him. And it was like there was a hollowness in all that he had, and yet all he had in his life was all that anybody in that world could have. He had the wealth, he had the fame, he had the power, he had love, he had people he loved, he had children, he had all those things. And yet, the overwhelming emptiness that he felt was so tangible and so unbearable. And as he looked up the sky and looked at the stars, and he saw the moon, and as he was looking at the moon, he heard the wolves howl at the moon. And as they bayed at the moon, he heard them howling. He recognized that they were howling at the moon just like inside of him. He was howling at the moon. And it was like it was his prayer to somehow be reconnected past the illusion of the dream he was caught in. And all the greatness and grandeur of his life just magnified the suffering of his life. For there was nothing in the world he lacked for, and yet he was bereft of joy and bereft of satisfaction because he was missing something that was so much greater, that part of him intrinsically knew had to be there. And in his anguish, as he looked up at that, he looked up at the stars, and he witnessed the majesty and the distance of the stars, and he understood the stars were far away. He understood the distance of that. And he just inside of himself recognized this and thought, how, here I am praying to you, to the gods of the heavens and the stars, where are you? And in his mind he thought, maybe you stars are looking back at me. Maybe you're looking down to this little world I live in, looking for your answers. And in that moment that he thought that and saw that, he became one with the stars. And he experienced consciousness looking back at him from the heavens. And he became the one looking out towards the answer, and he became the one looking back towards the answer. And at that moment he understood an extraordinarily powerful thing about life and consciousness and the process of life and consciousness and karma, that the root of all this is in perception and how we perceive. And so the process of awakening is an awakening of perception. And it's an awakening of the illusions of perception. And that experience of that set him free to then go do what he did and to walk away from the world of materiality he had. And it was a transformational moment that set him free. And so the part I would want to reach in every one of you, if I can, is that part in you that howls at the moon and is praying out for something more and feeling like there has to be more. Because there is an answer and there is more. And we come to that point where that hunger for that answer becomes strong enough inside of us. The magic happens, the door opens, and we start to see.